Just takes a few moments to go live, and then I'll let you know when we're on. It looks like you're ready to go.
Hello. I'm so glad that you are here as parents. I welcome you to talk about what's it like to parent gifted kids, especially those who are in the elementary school. I'm Julia Link Roberts, and I'm Executive Director of the Center for Gifted Studies at WKU and the Carol Martin Gatton Academy of Math and Science, which is also located right here at WKU. So let's get started and talk about what is it to be a parent of an advanced learner in the grades 3 to 5. And I'm going to ask you some questions. Do you know that gifted children constitute a category of exceptional children in Kentucky? That's really important to know because exceptional children has lots of law and regulation that goes along with it. The money doesn't come to gifted children as to other exceptional children because other exceptional children have federal law and gifted children have state law. But it's very important to know that gifted children are a category of exceptional children in our state. Do you know that there are 5 categories of giftedness recognized in Kentucky? Some states have none, some states have 1, and a few states recognize in all 5 categories, and I'll talk about that at a later point in the presentation. Children in grades K to 3 are not identified as gifted in Kentucky. And so as parents, that's really important for you to know. But rather, these children in grades K to 3 are selected. Notice the difference between identified and selected to participate in the primary talent pool. And this is one that I think that will help us understand the challenge of a classroom teacher. Research tells us in 4th and 5th grade classrooms, the teacher may have as many as 11 different reading levels. Wow. Think of all the planning that a teacher needs to do. Do you know that multiple services are needed to address the needs of gifted students? For a long time, it seemed that maybe one service would do, and of course that with 5 areas of giftedness, it requires multiple service options. And finally, do you know the needs of gifted children are often created by their strengths, and that's why they don't look needy. And that's why many educators don't see our high ability students as needy. But of course, you know they are, and so do I. So why should we be interested in advanced learning opportunities? And I know you are, or you wouldn't be here for our seminar tonight. You should be interested because Demetrius, Katie, and Todd will be performing your bypass. So it is very important for us to see that young people are learning at the highest level. They're capable of learning, developing their potential so that they can be the excellent professionals that we need. No one goes to find a proficient surgeon, would you? I don't think so. I think you want to find someone who's excellent. I think the same is true in many areas of our adult lives. So advanced learning is incredibly important for our young people. whether they're in kindergarten, third grade, fifth grade, and as they move on through their schooling. Aren't those cute little kids? A very important question that I want you to think about is this. If during the first 5 or 6 years of school, a child earns good grades and high praise without having to make much effort, what are all the things he doesn't learn that most children learn by third grade? Now think about that for a moment. School's easy, get lots of praise. What have you not learned? What have your children not learned if that would be the case? Well, this could be a fairly long discussion. And instead of a long discussion, I'm going to share with you a few things that the child doesn't learn, and then you can think with me about how important those things are. So, what has the child not learned when schoolwork is easy and it brings forth high praise? Well, if it's easy, you don't have to work hard, and so you don't develop a work ethic in school. You might develop that work ethic someplace else if your child plays a sport or plays a musical instrument or something where there is a challenge for them. But when it's easy and you get high praise, a work ethic isn't the end result. And if you don't have to study, how on earth would you develop study skills? And what a loss that is. Perseverance. Well, one wouldn't need to persevere if it's easy, if it comes pretty automatically. So perseverance isn't developed. Problem-solving skills aren't there if work comes easily. You haven't needed to learn to manage time, probably not to set goals, and really not to deal with disappointment. Occasionally people will put failure in with that, but please remember, failure isn't an F, it's something less than what you would want to receive. And so for some advanced kids with high expectations, that might be a B, or it might be a B minus. So think with me for a moment. If your child doesn't develop a work ethic, study skills, perseverance, problem-solving skills, time management skills, goal setting, doesn't learn to deal with disappointment, that may be a sure path for an underachiever, because other children in the class are developing those skills along the way. And if your child gets all 100s or all smiley faces or all whatever that's the very highest, that's probably something that you need to ask about in school, because there ought to be work that's challenging enough that it's not always perfect. That is a really good question, a very important question, by the way. So what do you think? Are these next points that I bring up fact or fiction? Are they truths or are they myths? I'm actually going to share 13 facts or fiction and look at what the research says about each. So let's get started. Gifted children thrive with more work. Is that true or false? False. Giving gifted children extra work that's beyond the normal classroom assignment is not differentiation. It's simply more work. And gifted kids are like any other kid. They don't want extra work, especially if it's meaningless busy work. So, number one's a myth. Number two, allowing a gifted child to tutor another child is usually a very effective service option. You really learn something when you teach it. I hear that a lot. Do you think that's true or false? It's false. Children go to school to learn, and they don't go to school to tutor. If they peer tutor occasionally, no harm. But actually, children aren't really great teachers, and kids who are advanced and get the material very quickly are probably not very good at explaining it to someone else. So when a child is put in a position of being a peer tutor, it may be to keep the child busy when they've completed their work, but it certainly isn't a way to enhance learning on the part of that child. Number three, just because a child is gifted in one area does not mean he is gifted in all areas. And by that, we would mean the 5 areas, which are gifted intellectually, gifted in a specific academic area, gifted with creative thinking, gifted in the visual and performing arts, and gifted in leadership. So is this one true or false? It's true. A child in Kentucky can be identified in one of those areas. Could be 2 or 3, but it does not require being gifted across the board. Do not expect gifted students to be model students. You think that's right? It is true. They're children. 5, gifted students are not at risk because they really have high ability and they can get it on their own. And the understanding with this one is you don't need to worry about them. They're going to be just fine. And of course, that's false. That would be very much like saying that a child who has exceptional athletic ability will be just fine without ever being coached. Well, they might be fine, but they will never develop the athletic potential they could with coaching. And the same thing would be true in a classroom, that the child may be okay, stay at grade level, but not develop the potential in any of the gifted areas that he or she could. Giftedness can easily be measured by intelligence tests and tests of achievement. Not true. Tests give us one glimpse of who the child is at that particular time. And although they're very useful, they don't easily come up with the assessment of giftedness. And just to keep the intellectually gifted part of that particular category in mind, here's a normal curve. And if we're looking at our gifted children, intellectually gifted children, we're looking at the very upper end. And by the way, look at the same 2.2% at the top with the same 2.2% at the other end of the curve. And those children would never be told that they're going to be fine on their own. And please remember, both sets of children are just as different from the average. And so our high ability kids do need to have services so that they can be making continuous progress while they're in school. A good teacher can teach any student, because if good teaching is used, that's all that's needed. False again. Good teaching is wonderful, and I respect teachers, and I bet many parents who are with us right now are good teachers. But remember back in the beginning when I said a fourth or fifth grade classroom could have up to 11 different reading levels? Doing the same thing for all of those children can't possibly allow them each to make continuous progress. So it's more than just good teaching. It's teaching that is matched to the students who are in the class. Even if the curriculum is accelerated for all students, serving several of them are still needed. Services are still needed for gifted learners. And the answer to that one, you think, is true. It is absolutely true. Link it back to the last one, number 7. Just teaching at one level, even a really good teacher at one level, won't reach all of the students. So services are needed. And in Kentucky's regulation for gifted children, there are multiple services that are listed, and here they are. And certainly not all of them are for elementary children, but some of them are, and we'll pick those out and talk about them. All children are gifted, true or false? Well, all children are special, and I couldn't agree with you more on that. But if we're looking at high-end achievement in one of those categories, everyone won't be at that outstanding level. And all of us know that if we're looking at athletic ability, there will be some children in each of these grades that are more athletic than others. Well, there will be some who are more mathematically precocious than others, and you can take that through each of the 5 categories. I noticed this in the paper this weekend, and I thought it was a real good way to highlight the differences within an age group and how variable that is. The 2020 Mr. and Ms. Kentucky Golf were announced. Mr. Kentucky Golf is a high school junior. Ms. Kentucky Golf is a 7th grader. That certainly demonstrates that ability varies, and it doesn't depend on how old you are. So the 5 categories of giftedness that I briefly mentioned in the law, and here KRS 157-200 includes 5 categories: general intellectual giftedness, and that might be what people think of first when they think of a child who's gifted. But each of these is just as important as that area. Specific academic area, really, it brings in 4 different content areas: mathematics, social studies, science, and language arts. And one could be identified as gifted in each of those when one is in the 4th grade or above. Leadership, the ability to get other children to do whatever it is that they have a goal set to do, and that could be for good or for not so good. And we hope that those leadership abilities can be reconfigured and redirected so it's always with good goals. creativity, the ability to think in a variety of ways and from multiple perspectives. And this is an area of giftedness in Kentucky that is under-identified, and yet it probably is as important or more so than any of the others. And the fifth area then is the visual and performing arts. And here we break it down into different areas as well, looking at music, and that could be choral music, vocal music, or orchestra, instrumental music, band orchestra. It's looking at the visual arts, dance, and drama. So Kentucky really addresses many areas of giftedness. Mostly children suffer emotionally and socially when grade accelerated. True or false? That's definitely false. Probably acceleration is as well researched as any practice in education. And the data show that when the decision for any type of acceleration is made carefully, children thrive. While the popular perception is that a child who skips a grade will be socially stunted, 50 years of research shows that moving bright students ahead in any particular type of acceleration has strongly positive results, both academically and socially. So just keep that in mind. There are lots of resources on acceleration. There are two volume books that provide oodles of information to us on acceleration, and the second volume supports the research. So these, A Nation Deceived is available online. A Nation Empowered isn't quite as available, but it's certainly important. The brightest students tend to make the lowest achievement gains in school. Do you think that's true or false? It's true, I hate to say. And I believe probably that's been true because the message in many schools has been to get all children up to proficient. And remember, proficient means grade level. And that is a wonderful goal unless you're already there or beyond. And then proficiency is no goal at all for those children. A report called Talent on the Sidelines looks at the same demographic groups that the achievement gap studies have looked at, but instead of looking at those children who have reached proficiency, it's looking at those same groups of children who have achieved at advanced levels. And please let me say, not nearly enough children in general are performing at advanced levels. They could, but we've got to teach to those levels rather than grade levels. But I will say that the data for low-income children, Black children, Hispanic children, those for whom they're English language learners in fourth grade, very small percentages of children in those groups achieve at levels that are advanced, which is terrible to recognize. And for eighth graders, the percentages are certainly no better than that. I think one of the things as parents that we must always be looking for in our children's classrooms is, are they learning? Are they getting, as I said in the very beginning, all 100s or all whatever the top mark is? And if they are, That's when we need to be talking with the teacher about ensuring that there's challenge embedded in the classwork for the child. So this is the excellence gap data. Achievement gap data we've heard a lot about, but I think we really ought to be examining the excellence gaps and actually being pretty horrified that the percentages are so low for all children and exceptionally low for low-income children, Black children, Latinx, and English language learners. Gifted students are needed in classes so that students do not lack positive role models for academic and social leadership. I actually hear this a lot. Do you think this is true or false? What would the research say? It would say that it's false. Please remember that a child, let me explain it through an athletic example. If the child is just kind of awkward in dribbling and shooting a basketball, will he or she see the athlete who's really quite accomplished as a role model? Probably not. There needs to be some congruence between where I am and where the person who's serving as my role model is. There's got to be a fit in there someplace. And I've added one more myth. Gifted students can have one or more disabilities. Is this true or false? Absolutely true. And you may have a child who's very advanced in his or her thinking, in his or her artwork, musical ability, leadership, any of those categories, and may also be autistic, have a learning disability. Yes, gifted children can have one or more disability, and we call those twice exceptional children. Now people are talking about thrice exceptional children and perhaps multiply exceptional children. Please remember, gifted children's needs stem from their strengths, not their deficiencies. Del Sigley, who is at the University of Connecticut and director of the National Research Center on Gifted Education, cautions all of us to be talent scouts instead of deficit detectors. Let's look for the positive. You and I do better when we operate through our strengths, through the positives. And so with children, we certainly must keep that in mind. Not that we don't work to support areas in which they're not so strong, but that's not what we focus on. So what should a school look like for advanced learners? What should you be looking for in the learning your child does in his or her elementary school? Well, you should be looking for your school should be implementing state and district regulations and policies. But do remember, you've got to know what those are, and that should be very available to you on websites. Teachers should be implementing best practices detailed in the new standards book, and you could find those standards on the website for the National Association for Gifted Children, and they're also published in a booklet that this is the front cover for. So why are standards important? Well, they raise the bar in your school when teachers know the standards. We talk a lot about the standards that we've got in language arts, the math standards, the science standards, and all of those are very important, and teachers know them. They also need to be well versed on the standards on advanced children's learning. Services should include multiple types of acceleration, enrichment, and differentiation. And I think the fact that this is a red slide says it's pretty important. What is acceleration? You certainly know what acceleration is when you press on the accelerator on your automobile. You go faster. Acceleration in school is moving through the traditional curriculum at rates faster than typical. Should many students do this? Probably far more students are ready to move faster. And the only way we will know that is when we're pre-assessing before we teach. So what do we need to have in place for acceleration to work well? Well, you've got to do appropriate educational planning, and that will be between you, the parent, and the educators at your school. But what you want to do is match the level and complexity of the curriculum to the readiness of your child and the motivation of the student in order to have that work well. So readiness. Pre-assessment tells us a great deal about readiness. And it's somewhat like, well, when we don't pre-assess, it's kind of like driving a car at night without the lights on. What do you know? Well, you don't know nearly enough. And that's what happens in a classroom when a teacher assumes that it's new content for everyone in the class, because likely that is not the case. We also increase motivation of our students when we teach them right above what they know, but not so far above what they know that they can't do it well. Just remember, we want them to develop a work ethic. And if everything in school is easy and you get good, high praise for doing that well, the child is really not learning. And that is a huge problem. So when we talk about acceleration, it is possible that immediately you think of grade skipping, because that seems to be what comes to mind most readily. But there are more than 20 types of acceleration. And do remember, research supports acceleration when planning is done for it, and kids thrive when this happens. So on this list, what would be applicable for elementary children? It would be important for parents to know that being admitted to kindergarten, if your birthday is after August 1, all school districts in Kentucky have policies that a parent can petition to have the child assessed for readiness. But you've got to know you can do that in order to make that request of the school. I know that early admission to first grade could be connected to grade skipping. And one of the most successful cases with acceleration of a child I know well was to go from kindergarten to first grade in 1 year and then start with grade 2 the next year. So kind of putting kindergarten, first grade together, he's done incredibly well and certainly didn't skip a beat along the way. Continuous progress should be what all children have in school. That means they're learning new things every day. Self-paced instruction could fit in here. If the child is really at a different place than many of his or her classmates, having a self-paced opportunity to learn would be absolutely important. A child who's reading at a much higher level than age mates could be subject matter accelerated, and that means could read with the next grade up or the next grade up. And the same thing could be true in math as well. Combining classes, that would mean that you've got a second and third grade group that are in one class, and when the second graders finish that class, they could move on up to fourth grade if they had demonstrated that they had learned lots of the content in that class. Curriculum compacting is taking a math unit and you pre-test and you find that this cluster, this little group of children know it all except for one particular skill. Instead of spending 2.5 weeks on the unit, doing it in a few days and then having them demonstrate that they have that understanding. Extracurricular programs certainly can be at any age level, and most of the rest of them are certainly for older children. Then you all may have those too, but that's not the group we're talking about tonight. So there are two main types of acceleration, and one is the content-based. You stay with your age mates most of the day, but as I mentioned, you might go up and a second grader do third grade math or the like. And the performance-based would be that early entrance to kindergarten or skipping a year, but it's demonstrating what it is that you know, and it's the result of that acceleration takes place. Do remember this, and this is big and bold on the screen. The research is clear. Acceleration can be highly effective in terms of cognitive, social, and emotional growth. Where it doesn't work is because the decision was not made carefully, and you can count on acceleration to work if the child wants it to work and if the teacher wants it to work. Okay, so that's acceleration. Let's talk about enrichment. What is enrichment? There any strategies that supplement or go beyond standard grade level work, but they don't result in being placed in a different class or at a higher level or earning any kind of credit for it. So it's ways that we supplement learning, making it probably far more interesting for our high ability kids. This is what enrichment is not. It is not more of the same, nor is it busy work or puzzles. It is not thinking skills learned by themselves. It is not unstructured free time, and it is not sporadic. It is very important to know what enrichment is not as well as what it is. So enrichment in school or sponsored by the school could be learning centers. Learning centers might be still focused on proficient learning. So we need to have learning centers that will be challenging to the children. Field trips so that young people have an opportunity to enhance the experiences that they have had. Could be independent study. Even young children can have learning contracts. Service learning, thinking of ways that they can be of service to others. Simulations, and this is just a very short list of what enrichment could be in the school. Enrichment out of school could be so many things. It could be music lessons. It could be activities that involve creative thinking, like Odyssey of the Mind. Could be service learning, where they're working with others through a scout group, through religious organization, through a community group. It could be contests. And I would encourage you to think of contests as something that your child may well enjoy. And a way to learn a lot about contests would be to talk to the person at the school who gets all of the correspondence that comes in about contests. And if your child really enjoys art, you might want to ask that when poster contests or other art contests material comes in, that you get notified of that and your child learns about the opportunities to share what they can do, what their accomplishments are, because all of that builds confidence. One of the things we so much want for our children, and this starts early on, is for them to be confident with their abilities and to be able to share those with others. If we were together, we would make a whole long list of enrichment and what those possibilities could be. We've got several websites here, and I'm sure this is going to be made available to you. The first one is for our center at WKU. The Center for Gifted Studies offers lots of opportunities for your children, and right now they're all online, so no matter where you live, that would be available to you. For example, in January, we'll do a series of 3 Super Saturday sessions when the classes are offered in art, a lot of science classes, focus on language arts, but each of them is minds-on, hands-on. What do I mean by minds-on? It means that you're engaged to think in different ways. Hands-on, we all like hands-on work because that too is far more engaging. But unless you're thinking about your hands-on work, you really are not making continuous progress. And continuous progress is really at the very top of the opportunities that we want for children in school. There is a book on contests, and if your child is really interested in a talent area, as I mentioned, a book by Francis Carnes and Tracy Riley, The Best Competitions for Talented Children, Win Scholarships, Big Prize Money, and Recognition. Probably recognition is the most important of those, although each of us would like to have big prize money and scholarships, but we hardly think of scholarships for our elementary children. That book is put out by Prufrock Press. There are many different websites where you can learn a lot about enrichment. There are two that are right here, but they're guides for summer programming, for Saturday programming. And we at the Center for Gifted Studies do summer programming. We have Camp Explore for grades 1, 2, and 3, and that's a 1-week program. Last summer was online. We're hoping that this summer it will be face-to-face, but time will tell. Camp Innovate is for children in grades 3 through 6, and very much like Camp Explore, it's 1 week, and it's all the content areas, but it is very minds-on, hands-on. Then we have a 2-week camp if you have older children for those finishing 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And this is a 2-week camp. And every year for many years, except last summer, it's been face-to-face. It's residential and non-residential, if that's an option. Although I do have to laugh, if the child has been non-residential, very likely the next year he or she will want to stay on campus and be part of the activities in the evenings and on the weekends. And then we have a 3-week program for 7th through 10th graders, and we have a lot of fun with those. Harry Passau, several decades ago, was one of the leaders in working with gifted children. And he talked about the would, could, should test for curriculum as a way to determine whether the experience being offered should be for all children or if it should be for those who are more advanced. And so, would all children want to be involved in such learning experiences? Could all children participate in such learning experiences? Could they do it? And should all children be expected to succeed in such learning experiences? And he offered that if the answer is yes to any of those questions, the learning experiences are not sufficiently differentiated for advanced learners. So what can you as a parent do if differentiation is not an option for your child or is an option for your child? One of the things that it would be good to do would be to talk with the teacher and ask to see the pre-assessment. The pre-assessment should be offered to all children to see if what they already know about the topic to be studied, what their interest is in that particular topic to be studied. And the pre-assessment could also be asking how the students wanted to learn about that particular topic. A pre-assessment should be done individually, even with young children, and it should be written so that there would be evidence of what the child knew at the beginning of the study, followed by the assessment at the conclusion of the study. And just think of the satisfaction to the child who can see the learning that took place during that time of learning about that particular topic or that unit of study. It would also be okay to ask to see what modifications had been made for children who already knew the basics. Remember, proficiency is grade level learning, and that's probably pretty basic. And if your child knew the basics or could learn them very quickly, then what work has been provided that would take them deeper in the study or would provide more complex content to think about? It is important to go deeper into the content and to go wider into the content. But please remember that almost anything that can be studied by children in the elementary school can be taken to a more complex level and studied in middle school and high school. And let me use as an example, if we are studying the cell in elementary school, we would learn the basics of the cell. But please know that there is so much to be learned about the cell that there are graduate courses that are taught in recombinant genetics, that is the study of cells. So all of the way along, physics concepts can be taught to young children and then developed with increasingly sophisticated content or complex content as we move along. So what's differentiation? We've talked about acceleration. We've talked about enrichment. So what's differentiation? A teacher who effectively differentiates, matches the content, and it can be basic content or complex content, the level of the thinking process, and the choice of the product and the assessment to a cluster of students. Now, that's pretty sophisticated language in that definition, but what it means is that if I'm the teacher, I'm looking at the pre-assessment to figure out for which students in the class do I need to make it basic, and for which students who demonstrated they already know a lot of that, can we ask more complex questions? So let's talk about the primary talent pool. And I started in the very beginning by highlighting, I hope, the idea that the primary talent pool is for children in Kentucky schools K through 3, and that they are selected to be part of the talent pool because they have demonstrated exceptional potential. But the primary talent pool learning experiences are then planned to let high potential emerge. It's for K through 3, and the recommendation is to include up to 25% of the population. And please note, being in the primary talent pool does not guarantee being identified as a gifted child in 4th grade. But what being in the primary talent pool does is give the child who demonstrates exceptionally high potential, especially one who may not have had as many early experiences as some other children, to have those experiences in order to show what it is they really can do. In many cases, it will be their ability to think, to put together ideas, to make connections between what they're learning in math and what they're learning in science. It may be the child who when talking about the clouds, sees the patterns in clouds and can also look at the fact that there's a pattern in with plants. There's a pattern with math. There's a pattern when we add. There's a pattern. And if you catch on to the patterns, learning is so much easier for you. So the primary talent pool, and it may be called the PTP, but it is in Kentucky regulation the opportunity that schools should be providing to see that their children with a high potential have a chance to develop that potential and perhaps then be identified as gifted students. But no matter what, they'll be better learners and will be on a pathway to liking school, liking learning, and they will develop a good work ethic. They will develop study skills because what they're learning is challenging to them. So it is very important for you to know about the primary talent pool. Identification comes fourth grade and beyond. And children in Jefferson County Public Schools and all across Kentucky will have opportunities to be identified in one of the categories of giftedness or several of them. And once identified, an individual education plan that we in Kentucky call the Gifted Student Services Plan will be written. And the services that are included in the Gifted Student Services Plan should match the area of identification so the child has ongoing learning experiences to develop in that area in which he or she was identified. And of course, there are state regulations, and you can go to the Kentucky Department of Education, put in gifted, and you will see the law, the regulations, and what is available. Policy is so important because it makes things happen. And you've got policy at the state level, and you have policy in the Jefferson County Public Schools. Every school board in the state of Kentucky has policy on gifted education, and it would speak to the primary talent pool as well as to identification and services in grades 4 through 12. Probably this is the part that is most important. How do I partner with my child's school? I think a parent who goes in and isn't happy all the time probably becomes the dreaded parent. But parents don't need to be dreaded. We're partners with the school, and so we need to make sure that we describe to the teachers what our children are saying about what they're learning or not learning, and it's a good thing. So one parent said this: the major challenge I face as a parent of gifted children in schools is knowing when and how to intervene to make sure that they are continually being challenged to grow and learn. See, that's continuous progress. I know I am my kid's first and best advocate, and you are that too. But there's certainly the fear of being that parent and how that may negatively impact my kids. When my second grader wrote a note to his teacher on his homework, "I need harder problems," I took that as an undeniable signal that I needed to set up a meeting. So listening to what our children say can be one of the best clues as to what we need to be sharing with the teachers. So here's some tips for partnering with your child's teacher. Be informed. Be informed about what your child is learning. Stay up to speed with what the school policies are. Know what the mission statement is of the school. I often find that it's talking about developing the high potential of children. It's talking about being successful in life. Well, those are important concepts that tie in with making continuous progress, and not making continuous progress flies in the face of those. Cultivate a partnership approach with the school. Know what your message is and the purpose for the meeting. Teachers are busy, and frankly, right now, teachers are absolutely doing everything they can and that they know how to do to see that your children are learning. And then create a plan with the teacher to best meet your child's needs. It is very likely that a teacher may not know what your child is concerned about in regard to the classroom. So make sure that with your young child, you're helping open up that communication so that the teacher will know how to make it work for your child. And then be an advocate for your child and for high-level learning within your school. I would encourage you to run for the school council. It's a good way to be well informed about what goes on in the school and to be a voice for making sure that children with advanced learning needs are having their needs met during school. Sylvia Grimm is well known for work she has done on underachievement, and the title of the book that this came out of is Why Bright Kids Get Poor Grades and What You Can Do About It. How's that for an important, pretty interesting topic? And of course, it's looking at underachievement, among other things. So let's look what Alliance stands for. A, ally with the teacher privately about your concerns. And I think that privately is incredibly important in making that work. L, listen to what the teacher has observed about your child. Learn about what the teacher thinks is best for your child. And then initiate a conversation about your child's strengths and problems. And please remember, gifted students' strengths create their needs. And consequently, to many people, they won't look very needy. A, ask about experimental ideas for engaging and interesting in school and extracurricular activities. And negotiate to find appropriate adult and peer role models. C, consent to alternatives if experimental opportunities are not available. And E, extend possibilities patiently. And I think with all of this, you get the idea that it's private, it's patient, that we listen to the teacher and that we respect the teacher, but we also have the right to engage in a conversation because nobody knows the child like you, the parent. In this quote, the teacher is working to challenge the child and to give him room to grow. That's what is the bottom line for continuous progress. It is very important for children to have their social, emotional needs met too. And oftentimes that's only possible when the child has a friend. Doesn't need a bevy or a group of friends, but needs a friend. And a teacher can do a lot to provide opportunities for a child to be placed near or in a group with a child that he or she thinks probably has quite a bit in common with another child. Karen Bickett is a parent that I've known, and I really like what she's saying here. My most trying moments as a parent have been when my children have doubted themselves and their abilities. It is always hard to watch a child struggle, but it is very important to their growing up. All children should be allowed to fail and to develop resilience to persevere. I think probably one of the things that is the most difficult is, as Dr. Bickett says, to let the child struggle. But folks, we can't rescue kids. Once they grow up, you can't be there rescuing your adult child. And so we've got to, as they're growing up, give them the space to face disappointment if something they've done isn't quite as good as they thought it would be. If a class is more difficult, don't rescue them. Help them persevere. Help them develop the resilience they need in order to face opportunities that will challenge them. Carol Dweck, who is best known for her research on mindset, says success is about being your best self, not about being better than others. Failure is an opportunity, not a condemnation. Effort is the key to success. And see how so much of what I'm talking about right now relates back to that opening question. What happens to the child who gets all of the best grades and high praise for doing easy work? It's really not building the kind of lifelong skills that the child needs in order to be successful. So in communicating, it is really important for you to listen to your child and to make sure that you're not just asking your child, what did you learn in school today? Because you are likely to get the answer, nothing. Talk to your child about what did you learn in school, not what did you do in school, and then take the time to really listen and encourage your child to try new things. Often a phrase that goes with that is to take risks. I think trying new things for many children is taking a risk. Support your child. Ask questions about what and how your child is learning at school. Help in appropriate ways with homework and projects. Note the appropriate ways. Supplement what your child is learning at school. Go deeper, go wider with a study that your child is especially interested in. And then provide as many experiences as you can that build on your child's interests and passions, things that he or she is really wanting to learn about. I think the Children's Bill of Rights is very interesting, and you could Google to get this. You'll get it with this PowerPoint, but you can Google to get it at the National Association for Gifted Children website. A gifted child has the right to know about your giftedness, to know what's different, has the right to learn something new every day. That's why pre-assessment is so essential for your child, so that they're not spending all of their time in the classroom doing learning experiences that really don't provide anything new to them. They have the right to make mistakes, to correct them, to not be gifted in everything. After all, would we expect an athlete to be equally talented in tennis and football and swimming? No, not at all. So where do I get more information on these topics? Well, the National Association for Gifted Children has resources called tip sheets, timely information for parents, and you can get these off of the NAGC website. NAGC also has a magazine for members that's called Parenting for High Potential. A book that puts together some of the best articles from Parenting for High Potential from 2010 to now is Success Strategies for Parenting Gifted Children. Here's a book that my daughter and I have written recently, and although it says Teacher's Survival Guide, Gifted Education, it is a very basic gifted education book and would be easy reading for you. And it might be something that you would want to give as a gift over the holidays to a teacher to encourage them to be thinking about advanced learners. We've got several websites for you to pursue. And I would like to kind of end this presentation with the big question: what is the parent to do to support their children, to help them learn what they're ready to learn? Not what they already know, but what they're ready to learn. And I would have to say you've taken an important step by joining this session tonight to learn a little bit more about ways to help your children in elementary school and to make sure that they're making continuous progress. And here's my email, and I would always be happy to interact with you. And for the moment, let's have some questions. And I would preface this to say that it's better for your questions to not be absolutely personal with your child. If you want to ask those, send them to me on email or ask them within your school district. Anyone have a question?
A lot of the questions that they had were addressed. One of them was the mother was talking about how well her child is currently doing in the NTI setting, but she wants to know how can parents support teachers and school staff in using virtual and remote instruction to improve work with gifted children. And then also, once we return to brick and mortar, how can we continue to support the students' educational pacing and capabilities?
Well, I certainly love the tone of that question. How do you support teachers? Because there is no teacher at this particular time who's not doing his or her level best in order to meet the needs of the children. And it's increasingly challenging when you're not with them face to face. So I would suggest 2 or 3 of the things that I ended the presentation with, and one is to listen when teachers are telling you what they see about your child, not necessarily with a rebuttal if that's what you're really sensing that you could do, but listening and then asking questions like, how could we work together to see that my child has the opportunity to learn. I will tell you one word I would never use with teachers, and although it may be true, I wouldn't say my child's bored. It always kind of flies in the face of what works well. And so as your students will be transitioning back to brick and mortar, we hope sooner rather than later, but these are most unusual times. I think asking questions and providing positive comments to teachers about anything they've done that has really worked well for your particular child.
And one thing I might add, many times parents have great resources that they know about that teachers may not know about. It may be your profession. If you work in a particular field, architecture or a science field, or that you may be able to serve as a resource person or may know of other resources in your field that would be helpful. I am seeing teachers now take full advantage of this online learning by offering some extension activities that when students have met their classroom goals, then they have some links on their websites, their teacher websites, where the students can go. And so as parents, if you have, information about links that you've used with your child, you might share those with the teacher that he or she can make those available for other children in the classroom. So don't be shy about sharing your expertise and your knowledge, because it may benefit many others.
And I kind of, just to tie into that, Mary, I think that anytime we advocate for our child, we are also thinking about other children who may have the same need. And so far more children benefit than just your own.
Jessie, were there some other questions?
The only other question was, is WKU willing to share the presentation that I can then link to the video?
I think that's a Jefferson County Public School question, isn't it?
If you are willing to let us share it, then I will most definitely share it.
I actually thought that was the intention.
I did too. I just wanted to double check with you. We did have one parent, and I dropped quite a few resources in the YouTube chat, but one parent was asking about 2E specifically for autistic students, but I know that we are going to have a Twice Exceptional parent information session coming up, and I did drop quite a few links. One of them specifically from WKU from when we had our 2E seminar a couple of weeks ago.
I think the only thing that I would particularly want to say about Twice Exceptional Children is that it takes a team to let that child thrive in school, and it will be the gifted resource teacher, the special education teacher, and the classroom teacher, as well as the parent. And if everyone can get on the same page and work as a team, that child is likely to thrive.
Jessie, was there a question about working in TI with gifted students?
The question was just mainly around how can the parent continue to support the teacher in the school during the NTI setting to make sure that the child is receiving adequate services, which we've addressed quite readily. And the parent themselves even put in the comment that they are very happy with what's occurring at the school level, and that they are receiving a lot of that differentiated instruction, and the child's able to set his or her own pace, which is something that Dr. Roberts was also talking about.
Oh, I love to hear that this is happening. I think it's especially difficult to differentiate with NTI. So I love it. Good to hear.
And the online learning, there are many programs that do lend themselves well to self-paced learning. There's reading programs and math programs that, pre-assess where a child is and then, start them working at that level. And most parents, I think, are also familiar with the Khan Academy, but if you're not, that's a great resource to look into. They have videos on a wide variety of topics. Another thing that we saw this past summer in the Summer Explorations Academy that maybe some of these parents' children participated in was teachers who were providing virtual field trips. And if your child's interested in, a facet of science or the military or art, there's so many wonderful virtual field trips to museums and things that students can do. The other thing we saw the teachers doing this summer was developing choice boards. And so we know it's so important for our students to have choices. And so if teachers can be encouraged to offer a choice, even if a teacher only offers one assignment, many times they'll be open if they're approached by the child or the parent to say, could they do this variation of that assignment? And then many times that'll be more appealing to the child and will increase their motivation.
Dr. Evans, I wholeheartedly agree, having come from that teacher role not very long ago, but a little bit in the past, and actually allowing them to have that either independent study or the choice like you suggested with those choice boards, we really start to foster their giftedness even more within the NTI setting, because we do have that capability. The virtual field trips are fantastic. They allow students to visit somewhere where right now it's not possible for them to visit. And even if it wasn't COVID and everything wasn't shut down, they might not be able to visit anyway, but it's giving them that chance, especially with some of our visual and performing arts students. They might be able to visit the Louvre, and it's not something that they would be able to do right now, but they're able to go virtually to the Louvre, and then they're able to maybe critique some of the art and actually have a mark on the world in regards to using those virtual field trips and being exposed to something that they wouldn't normally have the chance to be exposed to.
Absolutely.
Dr. Roberts, I know you mentioned independent study as one of our service delivery options. I feel like that is very, very easily done in the NTI setting. If a student's mastered the core content, like you said, when they're doing those pre-assessments, to have them do an independent study project. I had kindergartners when I was in a different state who actually would do some of those independent projects with guidance, of course, from the teacher, but they were starting to explore their passions based on, as you had said, one of those core standards, but going beyond that. In kindergarten, we start learning about the parts of the plants, but we have plenty of students in the primary grades who want to know more than just, okay, these are the roots, this is the stem, these are the leaves. They really need that independent study, and it does lend itself beautifully in this NTI setting, but it also blends well when we do return to brick and mortar, and they can continue to do those independent studies within the classroom when they've mastered those previous skills.
Absolutely. And when they do that and the independent study is tied to the same concept being studied, it extends the learning for everyone in the class when they share that. And so it's a win-win for all the students.
Well, ladies, I want to personally thank you for joining us this evening. This has been very, very informative. The chat has just been blowing up with how much useful and helpful information you have provided. We are looking forward to our further sessions. We will have one for primary talent pool. We'll have one for middle school, high school, twice exceptional. And then we are continuing to work on some more. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We will be posting them on our YouTube channel. Any future parent information sessions that are coming up. But again, I just wanted to personally thank Dr. Evans, Dr. Roberts, and Dr. Inman did have to jump off, but I wanted to thank you ladies for providing this very useful information to our JCPS community.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate every parent taking the time to join us tonight. Thank you.